There are two main questions that come to mind regarding this new Apple Magic Keyboard for iPad that need to be addressed. One, has it changed the way iPad is being used? And two, is it worth it from a value proposition? Stay tuned and find out. Let's get to answering these two questions by first reviewing the new Magic Keyboard into sections. First up, design. The first thing that comes to mind when putting it in your hand is the weight. Compared to the previous generation, Apple Smart Keyboard for iPad, it's about 75% heavier. Then, comparing it to the iPad 12.9-inch itself, the Magic Keyboard is actually heavier, surprisingly. But when you have a deeper look, it actually makes sense. You see, this isn't designed like a usual keyboard for tablets. Instead, Apple crafted it to allow for the iPad to float by adding more weight to the keyboard. They're hoping to make it more stable when you put it on a surface. Additionally, they've decreased the amount of room the iPad and keyboard can stretch on the back end. For example, on an airplane, the keyboard will allow you to have more flexibility in managing your space, since it doesn't work like a typical laptop. Pretty genius in that sense. Also, looks dope that it's literally just floating. Apple calls it a floating cantilever design. Now, moving on to getting it open, yes, you're likely gonna have to use two hands because the hinge is very tough. And hopefully this will be able to be more durable in the long run. Built into the hinge is a USB-C port that has pass-through charging that can do one thing: charge your iPad, nothing more. Attaching the iPad is simple due to its strong magnets, specifically about twice as strong as the previous generation Smart Keyboard for iPad Pro, but equally difficult to detach. But that's a good thing. It connects directly via the Smart Connector, which powers the keyboard. That's because the keyboard doesn't have a battery like traditional keyboards. Now, this does take a hit on battery life of the iPad. To my testing, I want to say it decreases the battery life by at least 25%. But hopefully this is something that can be addressed in future software updates. Now, back to that USB-C port on the keyboard. Again, it's strictly used for charging iPad while using the USB-C port on the iPad Pro for free accessories such as external drives, displays, or input devices. Now, if you're thinking if it's faster to charge it directly through the USB-C port on the iPad itself, you would be correct. It certainly is. I tested this myself by charging the iPad for 1 hour, once from the iPad, then once from the keyboard. Each time allowing the iPad battery to fall first to 5% before beginning to charge. From my results, the charging from the keyboard within an hour gained 44%. Meanwhile, charging directly from the iPad, it gained 65%. So fairly significant, about almost 50% faster when charging from the iPad directly, which is my preferred method. The old Smart Keyboard offered only 2 viewing angles. Meanwhile, the new Magic Keyboard offers far more. Apple states it delivers a viewing angle of 130 degrees, but realistically, when the hinge is fully open and the only amount of tilt I measured is almost 60 degrees. Small detail, but worth sharing for those interested. Now, on to our next section, that's the typing experience. Another major difference between the old Smart Keyboard and this new Magic Keyboard is it now has backlit keys, which are controlled dynamically by the iPad's light sensors. The keys are vastly improved from all the keyboard troubles Apple recently had with their MacBooks by changing from a butterfly to a scissor mechanism that delivers 1 millimeter of travel. Now, if I had to pick one thing that made the biggest impact in my use of iPad, it would hands down be the Trackpad on the new Apple Magic Keyboard for iPad. Weeks before I got my hands on it, I used the iPad with a Bluetooth mouse after the iPadOS 13.4 software update, but I wasn't impressed. However, now with the new Apple Magic Keyboard with Trackpad, it changed the way I'm using my iPad. It's a mechanical trackpad, but it has touch sensitivity, so you don't have to actually mechanically push down to the point of click to make it work. The specific reason for why the trackpad is my favorite thing is that it very elegantly transforms the cursor to highlight user interface elements. Unlike the traditional mouse, which hovers over top of buttons, iPadOS delivers a smooth interface, unlike any other operating system input device to date, in my opinion. iPadOS 13.4 with trackpad support is available as a free software update for all iPad Pro models. iPad 2 Air and later, iPad 5th generation and later, and also iPad mini 4th generation and later. From a user experience standpoint, it feels like you're typing on one of the new MacBook Pros with scissor mechanism. Really no different. For that reason, they're both called a Magic Keyboard. With the Smart Connector integrating the keyboard and iPad, it's instant, with no noticeable delay, and the trackpad, although smaller than the MacBooks, is very fluid and transforms the iPad entirely, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it usually comes down to price and value. And really, the only thing we can compare this new Magic Keyboard with trackpad is to its old Smart Keyboard for iPad Pro, which currently is priced at $179 for the 11-inch model and $199 for the 12.9-inch model. Meanwhile, the new Magic Keyboard with trackpad is priced at $299 for the 11-inch model and $349 for the 12.9-inch model. That's a 67% increase in price for the 11-inch and 75% increase in the 12.9-inch. But what more are you getting? A scissor mechanism keyboard that's also backlit, far more viewing angles, a much stronger magnetic attachment plate, more stable setup, and of course, you cannot leave out the trackpad. Next, what are you missing, or what are the cons? Worse iPad battery life and heavier setup. In summary, without doubt, this is the best accessory you can buy for iPad, which I didn't see coming to like as much as I actually do. It's absolutely changed the way I interact with my iPad by minimizing the amount of times I touch a screen and overall sped up my workflow. The harder question is, value-wise, is it worth it? Yes and no. If you're a diehard iPad user, then for you, most likely it would be worth it. Otherwise, for most people, let's face it, the larger 12.9-inch Magic Keyboard for iPad is more expensive than the baseline iPad at $329. That said, I'm gonna end this video with a prediction. I could totally see Apple changing the way macOS handles its mouse movements in the future by more so highlighting buttons or enlarging them to be more fluid like iPadOS. What do you guys think? Could you see Apple incorporating this into macOS at some point? Comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Hopefully this review was helpful, but that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, and if you have any further questions, let me know.